Legal scholar Nancy Polikoff, in her book Beyond Straight and Gay Marriage, calls for the extension of legal rights and obligations not only to unmarried couples, straight or gay, but also to kin or fictive kin who form interdependent units that provide child care or health care. Many of these units currently are excluded from benefits such as subsidies for public housing or the kind of tax breaks that are available to married couples. For Polikoff, then, the march to freedom would disentangle state support from marriage, as is the case in several nations with strong social welfare policies and, not coincidentally, more openness to same-sex marriage. And I hope we can talk in the discussion about some of the international comparisons. Aside from raising questions about the changing nature of marriage, historians point to related complications in the history of race relations that is invoked in the same-sex marriage historians' briefs. By invoking the precedents of Paris and Loving, do historical arguments in same-sex marriage cases overstate the tradition of support for racial equality? What, one historian posed, would attention to the persistent support for racial inequality reveal? For one, the formal legal right to marry across race lines did not lead to an immediate or significant increase in interracial marriages, nor did the Loving decision necessarily undermine racism in those mostly southern states that still maintained anti-miscegenation laws when the Supreme Court overturned them in that case. Now, the example of comparing white supremacy, resistance, and same-sex marriage may not work. There's so many differences between these two groups and their histories. But I would suggest that to some extent, the same-sex marriage movement has already had a cultural impact, as did earlier school desegregation and interracial marriage decisions, despite resistance to them. The same-sex marriage debate has managed, in a fairly short period of time, to displace a series of earlier gay demons, such as the child predator of the 1950s, or the promiscuous and infectious gay lifestyle of the late 20th century. In their place, the political discourse on the homosexual threat now involves the specter of monogamous, respectable, bourgeois married couples with children. This is no small feat. So whatever the legal outcome of the marriage cases, I think the cultural imagery has been transformed. And in this sense, same-sex marriage perhaps has been a more normalizing move in the culture even than interracial marriage. More radical than these conventional claims on citizenship via familial order is the role that same-sex marriage plays in undermining traditional gender roles. Scholars such as Nancy Cott and others have pointed out that traditional gender roles are reproduced within the family with ideals of male breadwinners and female caregivers. And in this sense, families formed by same-sex couples, especially by virtue of having two fathers and two mothers, necessitate the reinvention of the division of labor. In many such families, one partner is defined some gender stereotype, male nurturing, female breadwinning among them. In contrast, limiting marriage to one man and one woman can reinforce traditional gender roles. Same-sex marriage has the potential to undercut that association of woman with wife and man with husband. Now, I would add that whether legal marriage is necessary to that shift or simply gay parenting is a question we can think about. In closing, I want to say that I've only touched on some of the deeper concerns that complicate the March to Freedom narrative in historians' arguments in the same-sex marriage cases. I would simply add that while it's too soon to know how the legal and political history of same-sex marriage will evolve, I think that whatever the outcome, this chapter in legal history is going to provide a wonderful classroom case of the relative roles of law and culture in determining social change. Will judicial strategies for same-sex marriage prove to advance the march to freedom ahead of public opinion in the manner of Brown v. Board of Education? Or will legal change have to await broader social shifts in policies towards the family and sexual attitudes? Political scientist Gerald Rosenberg has cautioned that the courts can offer the hollow hope. Rosenberg asks, for example, whether the much heralded decision in Brown, in fact, served a conservative function by diverting resources from substantive to symbolic battles. And in the new edition of this book, he does a whole section on same-sex marriage, in which he argues that these cases do not necessarily advance gay rights. Even though litigation has created a social movement and spurred new rights claims, it has also created this huge legal backlash that includes the Defense of Marriage Act and Prop 8. Whether Rosenberg's predictions will be borne out historically remain to be seen. In the meantime, same-sex marriage cases provide an opportunity for historians to take stock of marriage, sexuality, and public policy, not only by offering our expertise in the courts, but also through our scholarly and pedagogical probing of this history in process.